I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. This is our reloading edition, much requested. So we're sitting here at the reloading bench, got some things set out, but first I want to talk about safety in reloading. Precision rifle reloading, like any other metallic cartridge reloading, has the ability to produce excellent results, but also has the ability to be absolutely and totally catastrophic if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. It's pretty much the most dangerous thing in our sport that you can do, because when it's all said and done and you load that cartridge into your rifle and lock it down, you're sticking your face right next to a 50 to 60,000 psi explosion. So it's important that we make sure that we pay attention, that we follow some basic safety rules, and that we do it right. If you're in a hurry, if you're distracted, that's probably not the best time to sit down at the reloading bench and try to reload. The absolute first safety point I want to come across is do not use someone else's loading data. We see this all the time. Guys will post up on the internet, hey, what's the best load? What's your favorite load? You know, what load should I use? Load recommendations that you get from other people are a guideline. What you want to do, if somebody tells you, hey, you know, 43 grains of Reloader 15 and 175 grains Sierra shoot great in my rifle. It's a pretty standard load, but for your rifle, you're still going to want to drop that powder charge down and work back up to make sure that it's going to be safe and it's going to be accurate in your system. It does absolutely no good for me to tell you what works great in my rifle, because every rifle is different. So you'll need to take that as a guideline and verify it to make sure it works well in your rifle. Now, there are some loads out there like the one that I just mentioned, 43 grains of Reloader 15 with a 175 grains Sierra Match King in a 308. That's pretty much equivalent to the M118 LR cartridge that everybody likes to shoot in 308 bolt guns. It's a fairly safe loading, but you still want to verify in your rifle, for the simple fact that you may have one of those rifles that the factory did something slightly different in the throat or the lead in that chamber, or things are just a little bit different and you may have a problem with it. Although I would say if you have a problem with that load, you're also going to have a problem with just about any factory bought ammunition you can find. The problem that we really run into is when guys start running screaming fast loads and pushing the upper end of pressure limits, and then they just start borrowing load information from somebody else and throwing it in their gun. That can lead to some catastrophic problems. Now, throughout this series, I'm going to talk about how we're going to do things, because there are a bunch of different ways to approach reloading. A lot of you guys that are watching this are just getting into it, and you don't have the ability to have a setup like this where you have a bench that's dedicated to reloading. And I understand that. We're going to try to show you some stuff that you can do just about anywhere. In reality, you don't need this. Everything that I use to reload for my competition ammunition, or even my plinking loads, I could go ahead and put in a large Rubbermaid tote and slide it in a closet if I needed to. So if you live in an apartment, if you're reloading at your kitchen counter or at your kitchen table, we'll show you some stuff that you can do and still get into this and still reap the cost-saving benefits. Now, I'm going to show you the things that I do, but I'm also going to try to show you some lower cost beneficial items. Some of the tools like the RCBS Trim Mate and the cartridge trimmer that I use, the Power Trim Pro, and that there's some more expensive tools, but you don't need them when you first start out. You guys have shot me a whole bunch of questions on progressive versus single stage presses. Since we're gearing this mainly towards the guys that are starting out, definitely a good single stage press is the way to go. There is hardly anything to adjust on this press. There isn't any linkage that you got to keep track of. when you're pulling the ram down, this is the ram, that's all you get. It goes up and down. As long as it goes up and down in a relatively straight path, it's going to do what you need to do. So we don't really want new reloaders to try to get into the progressive presses. Now, if you are an experienced reloader and you've say been reloading for pistol, or you've been reloading 223 for your AR to go out plinking, and you have something like a Dillon progressive press, those presses can be set into a single stage mode and allow you to load high quality ammunition on it. The key though to reloading high quality ammunition is consistency. You want to make sure that you do the same step exactly the same from case to case, from cartridge to cartridge. That's why I prefer a single stage press, and I prefer to reload in batches. You'll see when we get into this, I usually prep and reload 100 cases at a time. That allows me, at most of the local matches, one-day matches, you're not going to shoot 100 rounds. If you're going to a 2 or 3 day match, you may shoot 200, 250 rounds, but you're going to shoot them on separate days. Loading 100 at a time, that allows me to keep my consistency high, but it prevents fatigue from causing me to be distracted and have my quality drop off towards the end of the batch. So that's what I do, 100 at a time. If you're really needing to get stuff done before a match and you can dedicate the entire day to loading, then there's nothing to say that you can't sit down and load 200, 300 rounds in a day. Just so you have to make sure that you're keeping that concentration up and that you're not getting drawn away from the task or distracted or having the kids run in and ask you to make them lunch and that kind of thing. You want to make sure that you keep your mind on the task at hand. A couple other safety things to think about. When somebody comes up to you and tells you, hey, I've got this absolutely awesome load you got to try out, that's wonderful. Listen to them, write it down. It may save you a whole bunch of trouble and experimentation, but once you write that load down and you come back, grab a reloading manual, jump on the internet and go to the powder manufacturer's website. There's several online reloading resources which we'll post in the description down below, and verify that load. Check what the pressure levels of that load are going to be. Make sure that they're not giving you something and they just totally had a brain fart when they told it to you and switch the numbers around. It would really be horrible for somebody to screw up and tell you a load that's 5 to 10 grains over what they actually use, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. So you want to make sure that you're verifying all information that you get before you put it in a case and before you load it into your rifle. Okay, let's talk about where to get started. Now, I'm sure there are a bunch of you guys out there that have been shooting one rifle for some time, and you knew in the back of your head that you wanted to get into reloading for it. So every time you go out to the range and you shoot 60, 70 rounds, you take that brass and you throw it in a bucket and you say, okay, I'm going to save this and I'll reload it later. Well, that's great, and if you shoot handgun, you can do that just fine. If you shoot carbine and you're just using plinking ammo, that's fine as well. But we're talking about precision rifle reloading. And your brass is really the core building block for precise loads. So if you're looking for precision, you really don't want to start with a hodgepodge of brass as your base. You want consistent brass. So what I suggest and what works for me is if you're getting ready to start out loading and you want something consistent but that's not going to break the bank like Lapua brass or some of the more expensive stuff, I use Winchester brass. I don't get paid by Winchester. We're not getting any plug here. I just am a believer in Winchester brass because it's fairly consistent. It is a really good product. It lasts. But when I lose a piece, and notice I said when I lose a piece in the grass, it doesn't break my heart. When I get down to the end of its service life and I have to chuck it, it's not going to kill me. Winchester brass can be found pretty much all over the place. It's usually pretty readily available. The thing is, really, when you look at the cost effectiveness of it, it's some great stuff. We have to keep in mind when we're selecting our components, when we're going through our processes, we are not shooting for bench rest accuracy. It doesn't matter if your ammo is capable of groups in the teens, if you're shooting off of a rickety barricade, or you're just shooting prone bipod, and that's what you have. So we're not shooting for bench rest accuracy here. However, Winchester ammo or Winchester cases, when properly prepped, are capable of that level. So it's just something you want to look at. There are cheaper alternatives out there. There are a lot of guys that like to use once-fired military brass. Be careful about the really good deals on once-fired military brass. A lot of times what you're getting, especially in the 308, is machine gun brass. Machine gun chambers are horribly sloppy. They have to be, because they're not looking for accuracy. They're just looking to put lead down range at the highest rate possible. The brass is getting jammed in, fired, and ripped out extremely fast, so it's getting stretched and banged out of shape. Additionally, military ammo is crimped. The primers are crimped in. You have extra steps that you need to go through when you prep brass. It's just a huge pain in the butt. So I highly suggest, unless you're getting it for free, stay away from military surplus brass, military surplus once fired for precision rifles. Now, if somehow you're able to come across some precision rifle brass, that's fine. You can go with that, but this is easy to find. You can purchase Winchester at any of the online components dealers. I also like it because I've got a couple of shops here that carry it, so I can just swing by and buy a couple of bags. When you do so, you will notice that there are lot numbers on them. So if you're buying it at one time, try to make sure that you get matching lot numbers. It just helps you a little bit on consistency. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. I just like to keep them segregated by lot numbers. So if I have a couple of different bags, I will keep those separate. Again, it really doesn't make a huge difference with what we're doing, but it's a little bit of my OCD kicking in. So I like to keep it separate. Now, when you're starting out, there are a plethora of bullets and powder combinations to get you going. And this is where a lot of guys kind of stumble a little bit. What to load? I mean, you've got ranges in bullet weights, if we're talking about 308, from lightweight 155s all the way up to 208 grain AMAX bullets. So what's going to be the best for you? Well, the key thing here is what's going to be the best for you. You need to stop and you need to think about what your goals are when you reload your ammunition. Are you shooting for 1,000 yards? Are you only shooting on a 500-yard range? Are you hunting deer? Or are you hunting groundhogs? There are a vast array of variables that you need to look at before you decide what is going to be right for you. Where I like to start is I like to start at the bullet, because the reality is we care about effects on target. It doesn't matter what the target is. We just want to make sure that that bullet arrives there in the most precise way possible. So for instance, where most guys start out, intermediate range target shooting. If you're shooting from 500 to 800 yards, the 168 grain Sierra Match King is an excellent choice because it's readily available, it's not incredibly expensive, and it's a very accurate, very consistent round for shooting to that range. If you were shooting something, for instance, deer hunting, 168 grain AMAX may be a better choice because the 168 Match King, while it's very accurate, does not expand very well. And the 168 AMAX does expand. It's designed as an expanding round. Now if we stretch it out and you're limited to 308 and you're doing a 1,000-yard competition, well, there we really are maxing out the whole setup, and you want to minimize the amount of wind drift that you have. If you're wanting to minimize wind drift, you want the highest ballistic coefficient bullet you can fire, and you want to fire it as fast as you can possibly fire it. You want the most muzzle velocity you can get. So if you're looking at something of that nature, you want to look towards the 155 grain rounds, or the 155 grain Lapua Cinar, the 155 grain Sierra Palma round. Those are two very good rounds if you want to get them out there. However, those may not be the best rounds for the beginning reloader, or the best bullets for the beginning reloader, because to get the most out of those, you need to run the upper edges of pressure. You need to scream those bullets out and start getting close to 3,000 foot per second, getting them down range. That is going to harm your barrel life. Your barrel's not going to last quite as long, and you have to be keenly aware when you're doing things like that to watch your cases as they're coming out of the rifle and watch for any pressure signs, because it is very possible for you to work up a load on a cooler day, and then you get on a very hot day and a very high string of fire to where you're cooking those cartridges in the case before you let them go, or cooking them in the chamber before you let them go. You may end up with some pressure signs that you want to keep track of, and we'll get into pressure signs here in a little bit. So you need to keep in mind what you're doing with the ammunition when you go looking for things. Once you've selected your bullet, now you're going to select your powder. Now, there are even greater array of powders than there are of bullets. Everybody has their favorite powder that they've worked with for a while. My powder choices very often are first based on availability, and then based on specific performance, because there are a lot of powders out there that overlap. You have competing brands, Alliant, Hodgdon, several others that have powders that cover the same purposes. So you have quite a few different selections, and even amongst the same brands, you have powders that cover the same cartridge range or the same bullet weight range, and then you need to look at the specific properties of them. Now, if you're loading 308, two very good powders for 308 are Varget from Hodgdon and Reloader 15 from Alliant. Those are the two basic 308 powders. Now, there are a bunch of other ones out there, H4064, just piles of other ones. But if you're first getting into it and you're reloading for 308, I would suggest one of those two powders. Additionally, if you want to load for 308 and 223, which a lot of guys do, then Varget will cover both, Reloader 15 will cover both. So there you come down to one powder that will do both jobs adequately. Amongst those two, I would suggest that you try Varget first if it's available around you. Varget tends to be more temperature stable than Reloader 15. I use Reloader 15, but I'm aware of the differences, so I know that throughout the year I may need to chronograph my stuff just to make sure that I'm not drifting into a higher muzzle velocity, and keep track of that. So if you're first starting out and you're reloading for 308, Varget is a great choice. Varget will work for 155 grain all the way up to 175, 178. If you start trying to push your upper limits into things like the 208 grain AMAX, you're going to need a different powder. As a beginning reloader, I would suggest that you not try to do that. 208 grain AMAX, there really aren't published loads for it for the 308, so it's something that you have to experiment with. So you'll see that on the board a lot, talking about pushing the limits of the 308, shooting the 208 AMAX. Stay away from it unless you've got a base of experience in reloading and you know what you're doing. Once we've selected our powder, really the last component is primer. I don't sweat primers too much, because if you stay in the match primers, you're going to get good consistency from batch to batch. I use Federal Gold Medal Match. I've also used CCI, but match primers across the board are good to go. I have not used Wolf match primers yet. I just I've settled on federal. Federal works for me. I haven't seen a need to change. You do want to make sure that you understand that which primers are compatible with your priming systems. There are some priming systems that will caution you not to use a certain brand of primers because those primers may be a little bit more sensitive and they may detonate in the priming system. So whatever you use to prime, make sure you read the cautions for it and you know that your primers are compatible with it. A lot of times this is something that the lawyers threw in to cover their butts, but it's still something worth your consideration so that you can make a good choice based upon that. Now once we've got our bullet, we've got our powder selected, and we've got our primer, we need to go into the information and figure out what our charge weights are going to be. That's when you come in to our loading books here. Now this one I have here is a Lee loading manual. This is a second edition. I'm not sure what edition they are up to yet. They keep updating them because new powders come out, new bullet types come out, so you'll get more editions as you go down the line. I like hard reloading manuals. It's just something about having a book in your hands and being able to page through it in an instant. It's not 100% required though. I tend, in the back of my mind, I really have this thought that when you have a print copy, a little bit more care has gone through to make sure that the information is correct, because it costs money to correct these versus the internet. You know, people screw up on the internet all the time. You just log back in, change the numbers, and it doesn't cost anything to fix it, unless somebody blows their gun up, of course. Then that can be a very expensive mistake. But I kind of like the paper books. The disadvantage of them is they do go out of date. You know, once you're 5 or 6 editions down the road, you may want to pass them on. I also have the Hornady reloading manual here. As you notice, I like to have several different options. The reason being, I like cross-referencing information. It all comes back to that fact that you're going to stick your face next to this cartridge when you set it off. So I like to be careful. Being careful when you're reloading and being conservative will go a long way towards making your weapon last, making your equipment last, and making your reloading hobby last. Because it's very difficult to reload if you're missing hands and fingers and eyes and that kind of stuff. So make sure that you're being conservative and make sure that you're being overly cautious when you do this stuff. If you do not have a reloading manual or you don't have access to the reloading manuals, there are a couple other resources that you can use. On the internet, as you can see on my bench here, I have a laptop behind me. Hodgdon has a great website that allows you to go down and put in the rifle cartridge you're using, the bullet type you're using, select your powders. If you have not selected a powder yet, it offers you a great opportunity to go in and put in your bullet weight, and it will give you a list of powders and charge weights and velocities for that, so it gives you a good idea. Now, we're going to go ahead and put up a screenshot of the Hodgdon reloading site here, and you'll notice that when we go down through this and we select our bullet type, we have a powder listing. Once we select a powder, it will give us a starting charge. Now, a starting charge is very important information. Through their testing of the powder, and they actually do pressure testing on a test chamber and test action, they've determined that the starting charge should be safe in all rifles. So if you just bought a rifle, you've never shot anything through it, and you load up a cartridge case with the starting charge, that should be safe in that rifle. It's going to be incredibly underpowered. You're not going to get good performance with a starting charge, but it's a safe charge. Then what you want to do or at least what I do, is I work up a charge weight increment from that. I will usually work up for a 308 in half grain increments. So I will start at the charge, or at the starting charge, and load one cartridge at that weight. I'll then move up to the next, which will be 0.5 grains more than that, and load another cartridge. Move up 0.5 grains again, and keep going until I get up about 2 steps above where I think I want to be as far as velocity and as far as performance. I go 2 steps above because when we go to the range and we shoot these, we're looking for pressure signs as we shoot each cartridge. And again, we'll get into that here shortly when we go through and we actually do some firing out at the range. You're looking for these pressure signs so that you know when to stop and not go any higher. Sometimes you may hit pressure sign before the velocity that you wanted, and you know if you're really keen on that velocity or that performance, you may have to switch to a different powder, or you may have to go a different route. Sometimes you may get well above what you wanted and not see any pressure signs. There, your discretion is going to be if you continue to go forward or if you stop. What you really want to pay attention to, though, is you don't want to start below the starting charge. If you go below that starting charge, you may cause the powder to detonate in the case, and it may be a more severe situation than being at the max pressure for that load. So the rule of thumb in reloading, and what's published in most loading manuals, is do not go more than 10% below a starting charge for any reason. You can cause all kinds of problems. So start at the starting charge. It kind of sounds like a common sense thing, but I kind of have the need to express that. Start at the starting charge and then step up from there. Now, when we actually get to bullet seating, we'll go into bullet seating in depth, but when you're working up a load, if you are going to play with your bullet seating depth, you want to start with that bullet as far out, jammed into the lands as you can. When the bullet's jammed into the lands, that is going to be the highest pressure condition. So we want to start when we're looking for pressure signs, when we're seeing what the tolerance of the load is. We want to start with the highest pressure condition possible and then work back from there. So that has the potential for the highest pressure. Starting charge with the bullet jammed into the lands has the potential for the highest pressure. So we'll start with starting charge with the bullet jammed into the lands. As we go up, once we figure out where that pressure sign is, that charge weight is our upper limit. That's where we stop. We don't go beyond that. If you have any cartridges loaded beyond that, pull them down right there, remove the powder from them, get rid of them. That way they don't get mixed back in and they don't accidentally find their way back into that rifle. It would be in your best interest to take something simple like this kinetic bullet puller out to the range with you when you do your load workups. That way you can just stick the cartridge in the end, tighten it down, wrap it on the bench a couple of times. It pops your bullet out, dumps your powder. Have a container that's labeled with what powder it is with you. Dump the powder in the container, save the bullet in the brass, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it finding its way back into a gun and blowing something up. So once we find that upper pressure limit with the bullet jammed into the lands, we know that's the limit. That's where we don't want to go past. So depending on what workup style that you use, and again, we'll go into a couple of those here later. Depending on what workup style you use, once you find what your most accurate charge weight is, then you can start backing the bullet off and watch what that's doing to your accuracy. And that will give you the best combination between those two. Now for me, I don't play with seating depth a whole lot because I shoot tactical matches. Tactical matches will require repeaters. Repeating rifles, the bullet seating depth is generally limited by the mag length. So it really doesn't matter to me if I'm jamming or jumping or etc. yields the best accuracy. What matters to me is that the cartridge feeds from the magazine. So I will run them as long as they can go and still feed from the magazine reliably. They may feed great slow fire, but you may start hanging up the tips of the bullets when you start running fast. So you need to make sure that you test your depth when you're running that fast. So I'll leave a little bit of leeway in there. That's my view on bullet seating depth, so I don't mess around a whole lot with it. And since I keep them at magazine length, I figure out what that length is that I want to start with, and when I start my charge weight testing, I start at that seating depth. Now, I realize at this point, new reloaders, your brain's probably spinning a little bit. You're probably a little bit confused here, but fear not. This is just the overview of what we're going through. Once we swing into this, we are going to go step by step, and I'm going to demonstrate to you each step that I use. Now, we're getting towards the end of this video, and I'm just going to tell you exactly how we're going to go about this. I thought long and hard about how I wanted to set this up and how I wanted to demonstrate this to you guys. Loading for 308 is something that I've done for a long time, so there are a lot of things that I do that I tend to not even think about. So instead of showing you guys how I load for 308, I figured what I'm going to do is we just put a new 243 Winchester barrel on the Accuracy International AE Mark II. I have never fired a shot through this barrel. I have no 243 ammo at all. We are going to start out with fresh brass, fresh bullets, fresh powder, and we're going to basically demonstrate to you how you start with absolutely no information about the rifle other than what the caliber and the twist rate is, and go from nothing to an accurate load. Obviously, this rifle is going to be used for tactical target matches, so we're going to be shooting bullets based on that, and we're going to go through each step as we go. The first step that we're going to start on next week will be brass preparation. We're going to be using Winchester brass. We're going to be using, for this workup, we're going to be using 107 grain Sierra Match Kings. Again, they're available locally to me. I can run right down to the shop and pick them up, as opposed to 115 grain D-Tacs, which I will probably use later on, but I have to purchase those mail order in bulk and get them sent in. We are going to be using Hodgdon H4350, and we will talk about how we came up with the decision to use this as well. Now, I know mentioning that we're going to do 243 may be a letdown to some of you guys, but fear not, because everything we do with the 243 correlates to the 308. 243 is a 308 parent case. So basically all a 243 is a 308 Winchester cartridge neck down to 6mm. So it's everything still applies. The way we're going to prep the brass, the way we are going to load it, the way we're going to do our workup, all applies to 308 Winchester. It even applies to 223. So there's nothing really crazy. We're not shooting any wildcats. Now, we are starting with new brass, so the prep on new brass before we do our first loading is a little bit different than the prep on once fired brass. But the way we're going to run this is we are going to start it, we're going to do the workup with new brass, we're going to do all that preparation, and then we're going to come back after the workup and after we determine what our most accurate is, and we're going to demonstrate how to reload the once fired brass for your actual test runs with your charge weight that you came up with. So we'll show you both ways to do it. New brass, when you're working up a charge, it's good to go, again, because of the consistency level. We're gonna show you exactly what you need to do to make sure it's consistent shot to shot. We are not going to go through neck turning. I don't think neck turning is necessary when you use quality brass like the Winchester. for tactical rifle matches. Neck turning is probably a good idea if you're shooting bench rest. But for tactical rifle, it's not that big of a deal. I have done neck turning on tactical rifle before, and I have not really seen an accuracy increase that to me makes it worth the trouble that you have to go through to neck turn rounds. We are going to deburr the flash hole. We are going to cut the primer pocket to an even depth, and we'll show you how to do that both with hand tools and with power tools. So I hope that answered some of the questions that we got. We're not going to just shotgun the questions out here like we do on regular Mail Call Mondays, because I'm trying to keep this in a step-by-step format. This is just the overview. I hope you really have not gotten tired of listening to me talk. I hope this hasn't bored you too much. The next section is going to be specifically on brass preparation. So if you have questions on brass preparation, send us the questions on brass prep, and we'll show you how we do it. And then at the end, we're going to answer all the questions that you send us on the brass prep. Well, thank you for watching. If you've liked this video, please click that thumbs up button below. If you dislike the video, please leave me a comment and let me know why. We need constructive criticism to improve what we're doing. If you're a subscriber, thank you very much. If you're not a subscriber, please click that subscription button. It doesn't cost you anything. We won't send you any junk mail, and YouTube will let you know when we release new videos. So, click that subscription button. Folks, metallic cartridge reloading can be extremely dangerous, so please do not copy anything that we do here unless you know why you're doing it and you've verified through proper reloading manuals and proper reloading practices that it is a safe thing to do. We are not responsible if you blow up your gun or blow up your face. Please verify everything that you do.